Good evening and welcome to the Moving Home with Charlie weekly workshop with Charlie Lambden and guests. Live at 8 p.m. every Wednesday. This show is here to help all home movers of the UK be better prepared for dealing with the gauntlet that is trying to move home.
Helping make sure everyone has a home.
Whether you're buying, selling or both, it's a live show. So if you have a question about your move, pop it in the live chat. In the meantime, sit back, have a noisy slurp of your drink, and enjoy the show.
Sorry, I can't resist it. It's silly. You think it would get old, but it doesn't. Evening, everybody. Welcome to another Wednesday weekly workshop. Every Wednesday at 8 o'clock, I'm here to take your questions with a special guest. And this evening, we are talking about how the amendments to the Renters' Rights Bill are going to affect tenants, landlords, and agents. And I haven't had a chance to talk to Suzanne before we get into it, but I also want to discuss with her the potential timing of when this bill is going to come in. Suzanne is waiting in the wings. We'll be right with her any moment. Just a quick piece of admin. So tonight is also at 9:30 p.m. the private movers live Q&A video conference, right? So that is an unrecorded video call for members of the club only. There's quite a few new members since we last did one. But if you haven't joined and you want to, I've put the link to the membership in the live chat. So if you look at the live chat, you'll see the link there. If you want to join, anyone who joins by 9:30, I will send you the link to join this evening's live stream. This evening's live video conference, and that's literally usually quite a small group of us, unrecorded video call, everyone in the room discussing in depth your moves if you want to join. Without further ado, though, let me bring Suzanne. Good evening, hello. Suzanne. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
You've had a long day, haven't you?
Yes, I had a breakfast meeting this morning in London at 8 o'clock, and we talked Renters Reform Bill. God, it shows I've had a long day. Renters' Rights Bill. Yes, and because it's about to go to the House of Lords. So, well, it is in the House of Lords already. So it's moving quickly.
So for everyone who hasn't seen, because this is I've lost count of how many times you've been a guest on the channel now, but Suzanne
I've got my slurp, my mug for my slurp.
Oh, go for it. Join in. Join the circle. Absolutely. So, Suzanne, you're a self-appointed, you're a lawyer turned landlord. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, so that's right.
You're no longer a practicing lawyer, is that right?
No, I stopped in 2019.
So now you're a landlord with a landlord's blog, and you have your website, which is linked below, is theindependentlandlord.com.
Theindependentlandlord.com. Yes, that's right.
Linked below. And you've got your new YouTube channel out, which I have to say, I'm very impressed. You're putting me to shame with the level of production of your videos.
It's me just going like this.
Much more of a lawyer than I am. I see very, very precise. It's wonderful, but very, very timely, quick. You get your videos out fast, and really, really helpful. So, and guys, links to that are below. We're live on, I think, 8 different channels tonight. We're on TikTok, LinkedIn, X, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, everywhere. We're live everywhere. So this is an important one because I think that this Renters' Rights Bill, even before they chucked all these amendments in, was going to be the biggest change in the private renters sector for a very long time. And yet these amendments that I'll just put them on the screen here, these amendments all on their own are another whole raft of meaningful changes. And what I'm hoping we can do, and we are here, everybody, to take your questions if this affects you, whether you are a tenant or a landlord or an agent, please put your questions to Suzanne. But in a nutshell, and as if we were just down the pub chatting over a drink about this, so there's a new maximum rent period. These are all things I think make a real impact, right? This new thing of proposed rent, a bidding ban, advanced payments ban, and a new way of handling rent increases. Is that right in a nutshell?
Yeah, and I've for anyone who wants to do a deep dive on it, I've got 2 YouTube videos on it on my channel, The Independent Landlord. But in a nutshell, so you remember, well, when we first spoke, it was the Renters Reform Bill. That was the Conservatives one, and that was already, a huge change from how the things have been since 1988. But then it fell just before the election, and now we've got the Labour version, and it is 20% longer than the Conservatives' Renters Reform Bill. And Matthew Pennycook, the housing minister, and I don't get into politics, but I'll just say he says it's introducing simpler regulation, but it is 250 pages. I should have brought it here to kind of wave around. I've got it in one of my little YouTube shorts, and it is so complicated. And I'm a lawyer, and I could barely understand parts of it.
Which, of course, and when it's that complicated, the real world implementation of it is just fraught with grey areas and implementation questions, isn't it? Because one thing to theoretically imagine how it's going to work out and write the words down, but in the real world, it's a different thing altogether. And I'm really worried actually about how much just these extra amendments are really going to actually, and of course, as I think many landlords do not keep up to date with these changes, do they? And a lot of landlords who don't do their homework are going to get blindsided by this.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I did a YouTube video almost straight away last week was these whole rent in advance payments. Now, I think what they're trying to do, when you look at the aim of the bill, is they're trying to make, they seem to think that landlords insist on large upfront payments of rent. And in my experience, landlords only do that. So it's not your normal month in advance that you pay, but lump sums of 6 months, say. And there are 3 times when that happens, because I've never had upfront rent payments. I've never asked for it. I've been offered it, but I've never asked. People have it if they don't have a good credit history, but they have savings or something like that. They might not have a regular job, but they've got money in the bank. They might be rich or whatever, and they won't pass credit. Say someone won't pass credit referencing, and so the landlord can't get rent guarantee insurance. And so in that case, if they have cash, they might pay the first 6 months in advance. Now, I don't do that because I still want somebody to. They can either afford it or they can't. And paying 6 months up front, I'm not, they have to be able to afford it going forward. But that's one case when people don't have a good credit history. Another case is with foreign students or people moving to here from the UK. They don't have to be students. And because they don't have a UK guarantor and they don't have any assets in the UK, and they don't have any income in the UK, they no credit reference. Often what will happen is the landlords will ask for upfront rent. So you might have a family moving to the UK. And then there's a third case where landlords use it. And that's where people are in temporary accommodation, maybe they're homeless, and they give it as upfront rent as to encourage landlords to take somebody off the housing list. And what's happening is these rules, they're banning all upfront rent. And it's not just that, they've made it really complicated. And I wrote to my MP about it, and I don't normally get into politics. What they've done is they've banned all of those upfront rent payments, like the 6 month, the 12 months in advance, or anything more than a month in advance. But they've gone a bit overboard and they've made it really technical. And it literally took me 2 days to understand what it meant. Is that the rules as currently drafted, and I hope they change, is that, so when somebody wants to rent a property, what normally happens is the tenant might sign the agreement and they'll pay the deposit, which is 5 weeks rent, and the first month's rent. That's normal. It's one payment. It goes through. Then the landlord signs. And what the rules are saying is that if a tenant pays that first month, not the deposit, but the first month before the landlord signs, that comes under the Tenant Fees Act, which means it's a prohibited payment and the landlord could be fined or impose a financial penalty of £5,000. But if the landlord, and the landlord's not allowed to ask for it, not allowed to, they can't receive it until after the landlord signed. So you just might, it's just ridiculous. What I think that they should do is to say that tenants can pay that first month's rent payment anytime before they move in, and it doesn't matter if it's before the landlord signs, and then that takes it away. But it's all these kind of techie stuff like that that will make all the letting agents have to change their processes, and you can end up, it's not a criminal offence, but you can end up a landlord who's not really doing anything wrong. They just want the first month's rent, which is absolutely normal. And because they ask like half an hour early, it's and yeah. And so I've been kicking off about that on YouTube, and this meeting I went to this morning, there were people from the House of Lords there and some MPs and things, and I don't know, hopefully they'll listen. I'll be writing in again, because
in my 25 years in the property industry,
it's gone too far.
In 25 years in the property industry, I haven't witnessed any successful lobbying by the moving industry. I've only seen successful lobbying by charities.
Yeah.
And it's astonishing that they're just ignoring it.
Actually, there's one more thing I wanted to say. Is under the rules that are in, and you did mention this, is a rent period has to be no more than a month. So it means if you have students, because a lot of students, they like to pay on a termly basis, because it depends when they get their grants, and they'd rather just get the rent paid, and then they know they're not going to get in arrears. And because the maximum rent period is going to be a calendar month unless they change it, then no agreement can have that. And so, I mean, a tenant can do it voluntarily, but they can't enter into an agreement when they've got that as a term. And so maybe the student sector will talk about that, because there's already a big shortage of housing for students.
This is a classic case of they are removing flexibility. That's what I see as happening. They are removing flexibility in the name of somehow benefiting some people. And there's only one of these 5 things that are on the screen right now: the maximum rent period being 1 month, proposed rent being the amount the landlord has to say they want, they can't ask for more than that afterwards, the bidding ban being just that. There's no point in having bids, because you're not allowed to invite bids anymore, which is silly. That's
but you will be able to, because what's going to happen? They're saying that, so if I want to let a property for £1,500, I have to put it up with £1,500. I mean, at the moment, I have never accepted a bid above it. I've been offered it because I want the right tenant, and I'm not going to give it to somebody just because they offer me 50 more quid a month. But the rules are going to say that you can't accept an offer from somebody above that. So what's going to happen is that landlords, instead of putting it up for 1,500, they'll put it up for 1,600 and then take bids below it. So it's just daft.
But in your video, I noticed you saying that landlords should take care to keep evidence of the rent they set and why. We'll come on to that in a minute, because then there are the rent increases. And I think the other thing you mentioned in your video, which I found astonishing, was that actually the way the new rules are being set out and proposed is that it would make no sense for a tenant not to challenge the rent. Because even if they're not successful, it delays the rent increase anyway. I mean, they just haven't thought it through, have they?
Shall I talk everyone through that? If they're so at the moment, there are different ways to increase rent, and the rules are changing so that in the future, a landlord is going to have to send what's called a Section 13 notice, Form 4. I've got a video on how to do it, the landlord will have to give to the tenant 2 months' notice of a rent increase. And if the tenant is unhappy with it, or even if it's the most reasonable rent increase of 1%, say, let's take it to extremes, then the tenant can appeal that rent and take it to the first tier tribunal for free. There's a backlog already, and then what will happen is the first tier tribunal will decide and take evidence to see whether or not it's the market rent. So let's say that the rent is below the market rent and the rent increase is 1%. So like the most benign increase. Then what will happen, the judge will make a decision, and the rent increase will be delayed until after the judge has made the decision. And so you could have a completely and utterly reasonable rent increase, and it will be delayed, I don't know, 6 months, however long it's going to be. And so what I say in the video is that, unless you've got a good relationship and you're being really reasonable with the tenants, which, I have lovely tenants. I have never had a problem with tenants. They're all wonderful. And I've never had rent arrears. And it's but if you have a circumstance where it's not like that, or people, they just, why wouldn't they challenge it? Because it's going to delay it. But then that's not going to help anyone, because the landlord will take that into account and just ask for more extra rent. And this is all just going to push up rents. And it's the buzz where they all keep saying unintended consequences, and the conspiracy theorists are saying it is intended consequences. But I'm going to keep out of that. But it does.
Well, I mean, to be fair,
it is rent control through the back door, basically.
To be fair, I don't think it's fair to call them conspiracy theorists, because there is a compelling argument that the only benefit, the only apparent consequence is going to be small landlords and small agents going, we're out. And there are all, I'm working with agents at the moment who they're at a real crossroads. They're going, we've got it's a one office branch. They've got a healthy portfolio of 100 managed properties. They've got long-term happy landlords. And they said that their landlords are leaving faster than they're joining. Right, they're leaving because they're just going, look, it's been a great 10 or 20 years. We're moving out now. It's getting too risky. We don't like the worry about not being able to get our property back. Don't really understand the law. Not going to spend time getting our head around the law. We're just going to get out. We're just going to leave it and get out. And they're not being replaced by new landlords, but there are corporate estate agencies out there trying to buy up these portfolios. So it's not only small landlords being effectively encouraged to leave, and larger landlords buying up the stock as it comes to the market, but the same with agents, smaller, independent, the kind of agents where when you get a good one, you get wonderful personal service, and they really care about you, build up a long-term relationship with them, and they know you and they can sort things out. But they're being pushed into the large corporate managed letting agent services, where it's all prop tech and it's all big systems and data, it's all automation, and it's just and there is a section of society who thinks this is a good thing. And there's a section who thinks this is good. I'd much rather have a corporate landlord than a dodgy slum landlord. But I think careful what you wish for, honestly. The thing is that when I look at this proposed legislation, I think to myself, who does this benefit? Now, I know that they say it's supposed to protect tenants, but in all the situations outlined in these amendments, I don't think it does. I think it actually makes it even harder for tenants who are financially vulnerable to get a home, because landlords are now going to be, just for obvious reasons, right, well, I'm not going to take self-employed people anymore. I'm only going to take them if they've got a good credit record. That's it.
Yeah.
That's going to tip people, because there are people who make a decision about whether or not to go self-employed based on whether or not it's going to help them get a home. Or get a mortgage or not, so it's tipping everyone away from self-employment back into employment, because only if you're in the system being a good boy will you be accepted as a tenant or accepted for a mortgage. And so it is absolutely a valid question to say, this isn't helping anybody that we can see. The only actual consequences we can see are smaller landlords and smaller agents going, we're out. We've got a few comments and questions I think are worth. Oh, wow, there's some fascinating comments coming in here. So Pete Mitchell from X makes the point that landlords will simply raise rents to cover their risk. But am I right that there's actually a provision to prevent doing that? You can't raise it too high.
Yeah, well, kind of yes and no. So you can raise your rent up to the market rent, and the tenant has the right to challenge it. The first tier tribunal can delay it, but if it's up to the market rent, then that's okay. You can raise it to that. There is like a little detail in the bill that if and it builds on something that's already there, but it makes it easier. If a tenant, so a landlord, when they let a property, they will have to say, as we said, the advertised rent, and they can't go above it. if a tenant then takes that, they will then have 6 months after they've signed the agreement to say that they think that the rent's unfair and challenge it at the first tier tribunal. And so then a landlord has to keep evidence that actually they had 5 people wanting it and they just chose this person. And that's why I've been saying to people, you just got to keep evidence that this is the market rent. And so if you've had lots and lots of interest, then that's helpful. So it is definitely going to suppress rents. I think this making it difficult or making it subject to appeal, because at the moment tenants can appeal already, but there's a risk because the tribunal can increase the rent if what the landlord is wanting is below the market, and they're changing the rules so that the tenant will have no downside. It will delay the rent increase, and the rent won't be any higher than is in the notice. And so I personally think that that's gone too far, that that they can't just, it's wrong if somebody's doing a valid rent increase that's not an extortionate rent increase, that they have to then delay for that until after the courts have gone through, the tribunal's gone through, and there's a backlog, as I said already now.
Yeah. So someone who calls themselves reviewer on YouTube says it's to stop people gaining an advantage by offering to pay a lump sum in advance. Well, that isn't. First of all, when you pay rent in advance, you're not paying extra or more rent. You're not paying the same rent. You're just paying in advance. The only advantage it gives them is the advantage of being able to rent a home. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to rent.
Exactly.
It doesn't actually give anybody an advantage.
Because landlords want people who can afford it. They want people that are going to pay the rent on time, look after the property, and be good neighbours. That's what it comes down to. And so I don't want rent in advance. I just want, because I would worry that at the end of the 6 months, can they afford it? What I want now is, and this, I am now saying this, is that I will now not take a tenant unless I can get rent guarantee insurance. Now, I do have tenants who have benefits, and you can still get rent guarantee insurance if they have a good credit history and they receive universal credit. As long as they can afford the rent, then you can get rent guarantee insurance. So I personally have become more risk averse when it comes to choosing tenants, that and I think it is going to be harder for the sections of society that maybe don't have a perfect credit history, and that the landlord's not going to want to rent to them because they can't get insurance. And if they move in and they're in rent arrears, then it's going to cost a fortune to evict them, and no one wants that.
But there are people, especially self-employed people, and people coming from abroad.
Yeah.
These are 2 comments from my ex. No, they said these are comments on my YouTube channel. So Wheel Opinion says, I failed to meet the criteria when I rented a house 5 years ago. It was only my offer of 12 months rent in advance that secured the house. And then Profound Familiarity said, I was unemployed when I met my landlord. I offered 6 months up front, which the landlord accepted. I then found employment and have paid on time every month for 7 years. So, these people are going to be.
You need to write to your MPs, particularly if they're a Labour MP, because the problem is that landlords are characterised as being unscrupulous. That's the word that they're all saying, unscrupulous landlords. Sure, there are some bad landlords, there are some bad tenants, but the overwhelming majority of landlords are good landlords. And this is just going to have, I was in favour of pretty much of the renters reform bill, but this has just gone too far, I think. And the problem is that the changes to these rules are making it very us and them, and it shouldn't be an us and them. It should be a we together, and that's how I approach being a landlord. It's a partnership. It's their property that they're living in. I lease it to them effectively. They live there, and if something goes wrong, I fix it, and I go round and have a chat and a cup of tea, and it's nice. It's not this kind of thing that you see in the media.
Absolutely. But the thing is, only bad news sells. That's the trouble, isn't it? But actually, as I've always said, a happy tenant equals a good landlord. Right? A happy tenant is a good landlord, because
Yeah.
the tenant's happy, they feel secure, they're happy with what they're paying, they don't want to go anywhere. That's the landlord doing a good job, and that works. And that, I remember doing a survey some time ago, and actually it was over 2/3 of tenants said happy, completely happy. The majority are happy. Got some other good comments here. So Thomas Moran also adds in, he could never get anyone to take a 6 or 12 month rent in advance anyway. But then we've got, this is a great question for you that I don't know the answer to, and I was wondering this myself. Mike 13 on YouTube asks, do these rules cover lets to corporate bodies? E.g., can a company pay 6 months rent up front?
Yeah, this is a very, very good question. So back in the olden days, before the Housing Act 1988 came into effect, which I remember because I'm that old. I was at university. I went to university in 1987. Because they had the rent tax and all of those things that were made it almost impossible for landlords. What people used to do is set up a limited company and rent through that company and to rent a flat, and that way it would get around the rent tax. Now I don't know if people are going to do it this time, and it may be that the government brings in loopholes to kind of stop it if it's some kind of sham. I don't know the rules on that, but if it's only an assured tenancy if it's an individual living there and it's their primary or sole residence. And so if it's a company, it can't be an assured tenancy. I'm not advocating people going the loophole route, because they always get closed. Sorry?
I mean, a lot of banks, sort of international banks in London, will bring people over for a while.
Oh yeah, no, that's different. Yeah, no, that's different. What I'm talking about is like, you want to rent a property to go and live in with your family. And to do that, you set up a company, and the company's not there for anything else. You're just letting. Whereas if you've got, I don't know, AstraZeneca bringing some people over from America and they let the property, then that is to me like a genuine corporate let. But yes,
and that won't be an assured short-haul tenancy. So it won't. So businesses who need to bring staff over for a 6 or 12-month placement aren't going to have a problem with this.
It's so for the landlord letting on a genuine corporate let like that, then that will be outside of the system. But the problem is that you have the rent to rent industry. So that's when you've got somebody who leases a property off a landlord, say for 5 years, and gives guaranteed rent, and then they let it onto individuals. That's called rent to rent. And whereas the landlord and the rent to renter, that's not an assured tenancy, won't be. If the rent to renter lets it on to somebody else under an assured tenancy, that will be there. And the problem is with the bill, and this is actually something I think is good in the bill, is it's making the top landlord responsible for the actions of the middle landlord. And so what this means is that the landlord won't be able to get around the responsibility by getting some kind of middle person in between. And then so that basically, it makes the rent-to-rent model a lot riskier. But me as a landlord, I wouldn't let my property to a rent-to-renter. Why would I? I want to look after it myself.
This is a good question from someone called New Bricks on YouTube. With periodic tenancies coming in, when will a guarantor's obligation end?
Yeah, I mean, that will depend on the guarantee, because at the moment, when a fixed term tenancy ends, it doesn't end the tenancy, it just ends the fixed term, and it will then automatically go on to the periodic tenancy. So people think but they say, oh, my tenancy is coming to an end after 12 months. It's not coming to an end. It's just that fixed term period. And if you don't do anything, a tenant can stay there. And it's not unless the landlord serves a Section 21 notice and then enforces it by going to court that the person has to move out. So for that one there, it would depend on the original deed of guarantee. But I don't get into advising on that, but that's the rule for that.
So are fixed terms coming to an end?
Yes.
Wow. So
No, but that's the big thing. So
right.
nobody will be able to. The maximum term that somebody will have will be the minimum term that a tenant will be able to sign up for is 2 months. So somebody can move in, and on day one they will be able to serve a 2-month notice to quit. And people just don't know about this. The whole tenancy system is changing. It's not going to be like now where you would have a fixed term tenancy for 6 or 12 months, and then you can either renew it or it goes on to a periodic. They will be a periodic from the start. And not only that, all existing tenancies, when it comes into effect, will become periodic. Overnight, it'll be a big bang. So you could have signed up 2 years ago
That's huge.
for a 5-year tenancy with agreed rent review clause, and that will end. And it'll be it could be as early as July, which I think is just ridiculous for something so complicated to come in by
They're
July.
literally with existing ASTs. They're just tearing them up.
I mean, it won't be torn up as such because those tenancies will still exist, but they will just become this new periodic.
They go automatically go periodic. Okay, so that's going to throw out any agreements on term and that kind of stuff. Will just
and any agreements, any clauses on rent review will be null and void. And so you'll all have to go to this statutory procedure. So if you signed up and everyone was happy, it was going to increase by 2% a year. And so you have got a lot of landlords that have got old agreements that have, say, a rent review clause that would be a maximum of 5%. But say they didn't do it for a few years, and now that they're a long way behind the market, and they can't increase the rent to get it towards the market because they can only increase it by, say, CPI each year, Consumer Prices Index. When the Renters' Rights Bill comes in, that clause will be null and void, and so the landlord will be ironically be able to put the rent up to market. So it there's just so much in it, and people are on it, and there are 2.3 million landlords in the UK. And the government's figures in the English Private Landlord Survey last year in November said only about 10% are aware of these periodic. Now it's changing to a periodic tenancy, and even there are about 25% of landlords aren't aware that Section 21 no fault evictions are ending, which surprised me because I'd have thought everyone had known about that.
It's been all over the news for so long. I can't believe.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, only that. Honestly. Even if I had a friend who's a landlord who said, "Oh, I got caught up by that," I'd say, "Well, I'm sorry. That's definitely your own fault. You are not paying attention."
Yeah. Actually, I could just see like a really easy question there. Are any changes to renter room agreements with lodgers? No, because they're not assured tenancies. I can do that one.
Right. So lodgers are unaffected by all of this.
Yeah, because they're not assured tenancies.
That is good to know. Yeah. Now I've got another question. So I saw somewhere, and I can't remember where it was, someone saying that they reckon this might come through sooner than July.
Well, let me talk you through the process. And I heard this firsthand from somebody called Lord Best this morning at this breakfast I got up at ridiculous o'clock to go to. So he was saying that it's now just entered the House of Lords. So on the 4th of February, they're going to debate it. And then there's going to be a committee a couple of weeks later, and then it will go to the report stage. He thinks that the earliest it will get royal assent, which is really step one, is after Easter. So we're talking April, May. And then normally the earliest that legislation can come into this sort of legislation can come into effect is 2 months afterwards. And they have to put regulations and things. But I am just hoping that sense will prevail and people will realize that this is complicated. You're going to have all of the companies that provide support to letting agents, say like Good Lord, they're going to have to reprogram everything. Yeah, it is a huge thing, and you can't. There's only so many people that can do it.
Something.
Actually, you need more than 2 months.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, within Best Agent, the national property site that I have, we have been gradually working towards offering standardized functions and agreements to fit around. I'm so glad we haven't got to it yet. we're going to be able to do, once
Because all the
law is
tenancy
passed.
agreements are going to need to be redrafted, but the problem is that they can't be finalised until the government publishes regulations after royal assent. So we're not going to be getting those until May or June, and then there's going to be recess, and they all go on holiday and then they have the conference, and before we know it, it's the end of October.
I can hear the word comrade being used a lot more than it used to be. We've got some great quotes. So yeah, Josephine Murphy says, I told my friend who was a landlord about fixed tenancies ending. She had no clue.
Yeah. Not many people know, and it's such a big deal.
So Martin Turner says you can't enforce the law retrospectively. Actually, I know that HMRC do that whenever they feel like it. They literally change.
Well, it's not going to be making anything we do now illegal, but what it's going to do is when the commencement date is a big bang date, let's call it 1st of October. On that date, all the agreements that people have, some of the clauses in them will no longer be effective, and whether we like it or not. And it's not the first time the government's done this. It happens fairly regularly, so the right to have a pet and all that sort of thing will all come into force all on the same day. So that's the plan. What the government is saying at the moment.
A couple of other interesting comments here. Matt Ryan says, glad to see the new rules stop discrimination against families. We found an ideal flat in the best location and were denied because the landlord doesn't want to rent to families. What do you make of that? What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I have my properties are 3-bedroom houses. I love letting to families because they stay a long time. They look after the property. And I get to know them, and they have kids at school, and I let them have a dog, pet, a dog, cat, hamster, they're just nice. It's their home, and I don't understand why you wouldn't want to let to a family, because to me it's a lot less aggravation. Because if you've got younger people that are moving in and out all the time, you got the voids and all that. Whereas if you get a family, they stay for a long time normally. And if you look after them.
So you haven't had any problems with kids scribbling on the walls and stuff?
No, I mean, you get wear and tear when people live somewhere for 5-6 years, but I had a bit of wear and tear, but nothing of any consequence, and no damage from the pets, might I say, none whatsoever.
I had another question here, which is an important question. Oh, we didn't cover, although you mentioned it. So they have confirmed that there aren't going to be rent controls.
Yeah.
Thank God. That would have, I think, just been sort of kiss of death for the whole thing. But that's not stopping the generation rent and the renters union all screaming for controlling rents. But it astonishes me how they don't understand how it works. And also, the one thing that I've gone on a lot about on my channel is how much, even if people are happy that there are landlords selling up and releasing stock that's suitable for first-time buyers to the market and allowing more first-time buyers in, whenever I say, yes, but look, the government says this is now the #1 cause of new homelessness. There are families who are fully paid up, they're in work, and they are being left homeless and having to be put into temporary accommodation because of these measures. And every time I say that to someone who's campaigning for this, they just go, la, 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 la. They won't even acknowledge it. I mean, some people said, oh, well, you've got to break a few eggs to make an omelette. Like, this is ruining people's lives. There's nothing wrong.
And the rot set in with George Osborne. So he introduced what's called Section 24, which means that landlords, they can't set off the cost of the mortgage against their rent. So it means that if they have a mortgage, they will be paying tax. They won't get any tax relief. Well, not much tax relief. They just get a 20% tax credit. And so it means that there are lots of landlords who are not actually breaking even on their rental properties because the interest rates have gone up and they can't claim it. They can't set it off against their income. And so they're paying tax on turnover rather than tax on profit. And there's no other business that happens to. But of course, the Treasury is happy to have the money, and they're not going to backtrack on it. And yeah, so I think that has caused huge amount of problems, and that's why you've got landlords that have been selling up because they're worried. Well, they're not making any money, and then they're worried that they will never be able to get their property back. Although, there are new grounds in the bill that means a landlord can get their property back if they want to sell.
Well, that's what you have just reminded me of the question that I wanted to ask you, which is, what is Section 21 being replaced with? What are the new circumstances or terms under which a landlord is allowed to take his property, his or her property back, if the tenant doesn't want to move out? Are there circumstances under which landlords will say, no, I am going to reclaim my property, I need to get possession of it? So how does that change then? So are landlords still protected against what they're afraid of, which is getting their property back?
Yes, but the process is different. So I'll just do it really quickly. If a landlord wants to sell a property, or if a landlord wants to move in it themselves, or to have their child or their parent or something like that move into the property, they will be able to do that. If the tenant is in rent arrears, they will be able to get the property back, although they've increased the notice periods and antisocial behaviour. And there are lots of other ones. But the difference between Section 20, and so some of those are no fault evictions. There'll be Section 8 no fault evictions rather than Section 21. So because it's a no fault eviction if someone wants to sell up, or if the landlord wants to move the family in. But what's going to happen is, it's said at the moment with Section 21, it's a paper process. As long as you've served the gaff safety certificate, etc., then the judge has to give you, if the tenants don't move out, the judge has to give you possession of the property, and you will win as long as you jump.
But that's only if they are in arrears or have.
No. It's just saying at the moment that the judge is, and it's a paper-based process. It still takes a long time, but the judge has no discretion. So what's going to happen with Section 8 is that you're going to have to prove to the judge, to satisfy the judge, that you are genuinely selling up, and that you are genuinely wanting to get your family to move in, and you'll have to provide evidence of that. You'll need to have lawyers, and because it's not something where you can. You have Joe Boggs representing you. You need to have a lawyer to prepare the documentation and the witness statements. And then the judge, if they're happy with those grounds, which are the mandatory grounds, the landlord will get possession. But there's a whole host of other ones that are called discretionary grounds. And so if, say, it might be a breach of tenancy, say they've got a cannabis farm in there, or they're subletting, they've breached the tenancy agreement because they've sublet and it's now an illegal HMO, then the landlord will only be able to, they'll have an extra hoop to jump through. Not only will they have to have evidence, but they'll also have to convince the judge that it's the right thing to do in all the circumstances for the tenant to be evicted. And so that's why they call it a discretionary ground, because the judge has discretion, compared to at the moment, if someone's got a cannabis farm, and it does happen, the landlord just serves a Section 21 notice, and then it's relatively easy. And at the moment, the biggest cause of landlords serving Section 21 notices is selling up. I sold up one of my properties 3 years ago because it wasn't making much money. It was a leasehold flat, and the service charge was so high, and I sold up and did a Section 21 notice. And so it's kind of, it's slightly disingenuous saying it's going to be the end of no fault evictions. It's just going to make it more difficult for the landlords, and it's not going to stop the landlords selling up. But which is right, landlords should still have the right to sell up, and a lot of people like fixed terms. So I give at the end of the first fixed term, I give my tenants the option. If they want another fixed term, I'll give them another fixed term. If they want to go onto a monthly periodic, I'm happy with that. And I because they they stay there for years and years anyway. So I do what what they're happy with. And I was talking to one yesterday, and I said, "Oh, when your fixed term is up at the end of the year, it's likely you'll need to go into a periodic." Well, it will be a periodic because the rules. And she was shocked. And she said, "But I like having a fixed term." And I said, "Look, you got nothing to worry about. I'm not going to be selling up. You're wonderful tenants. I want you to stay. This is your home." But so it's not just all the landlords that have to understand these rules. All the tenants are going to have to be communicated with.
So yeah, Billy Big Calls on YouTube says, will the new rules change the tenant's notice period?
Yes. Yeah, it will. That's a good question. So at the moment, if they're not in a fixed term, the tenant can serve notice by giving 1 month's notice to expire at the end of a rent period. So often that means it's a little bit more than 1 month. Under the new rules, I'll have to give 2 months to expire at the end of a rent period. But that might lead to more voids, because most tenants, well, certainly the ones that moved into my properties, they won't serve unless they've been served a Section 21 notice because the landlord's selling up. They won't serve notice on their property until they found somewhere. And so it may well be that they want to move, they want a bigger property, they want to go to another part of the country, but they don't want to be in the situation when they're going to have to go into Airbnb because they've given notice to their landlord and they've got nowhere to move. And so I think this is going to end up with a longer voids.
Yeah, I also think it's going to stop a lot of people who might have been thinking of moving because of just fear of the unknown, and it's safer to stick where you are with what you know. It's just an absolute mess. I mean, having worked with agents throughout the last 25 years through various changes as they have come along, even small changes can actually cause a lot of work. This is just astonishing. God, we've got a lot of people watching. We've got 600 people watching us live.
Oh, wow. I hope they will go and watch my YouTube afterwards. The Independent Landlord. A lot of stuff on there.
Yeah, it's all under there. So if you've joined us from more recently, this is Suzanne Smith, who is a lawyer turned landlord who runs the Independent Landlord blog, the independentlandlord.com, and her new YouTube channel is linked to below, the Indie Landlord, isn't it?
Yeah,
so go. You can find lots of really beautifully put together, very professional videos explaining all of this.
I have fun doing them with the.
I'm very jealous. Don't worry, that'll wear off.
It takes me a long time, and I'm quite proud of myself. I'm getting on for 60, and I'm there on Premiere Pro doing it myself.
Yeah, there are people you can. I'll let you know. So, a couple of things. So, do you see these changes creating more or less work for the courts?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's the only people really that are going to win here are the lawyers, because they're going to be test cases, and they're going to. What I worry about is that there are going to be good, decent landlords who make an innocent mistake and then they've got a 5,000 or 7,000 fine, and that there's not enough communication going into it. There's going to be there already is a big backlog in the courts and in the tribunals at the moment. It's just going to make it more complicated. But which is what I'm trying to do with my blog and my YouTube channel is try and explain how to avoid all the problems, how to do it properly. And to have good relationships with your tenants, because I think if you've got a happy tenant, it's what you said before, Charlie. If you've got a happy tenant, then it's being a landlord's a pleasure. Apart from when the chimney needs redoing, I've got that at the moment. There's always something. It's not passive income, and no,
it's running a business. I've always said it's running a business. The question I get asked a lot, and in fact, someone called Roni Bomick has asked the question about becoming a landlord, and having been a landlord myself, but it was some time ago. Several times I was a landlord. The way I look at it now with the risks, the law is moving further in favor of tenants. I think that therefore the risk of, let's just say, you as a landlord, you accept a really nice tenant, they've passed all the checks, they've got a good job, everything's great, but then the economy is looking worse and worse. They actually become made redundant, they lose their job, and they they've done nothing wrong. They actually,
Yeah.
the economy is now bad. There are no jobs. I was talking to someone who works in the film industry last night. She was saying 100% of the freelancers she knows have got no work, and she's never known that in her entire career of 40 years. So we're in that scenario now. Under the new rules, tenants in that situation, I mean, are going to be advised to stay put, aren't they? Until or unless the landlord gets a court order for eviction.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I've been made redundant 3 times. And 2 were due to company takeovers, and another one was in 2008 when the company I worked for went bust. And I got I can't remember what it was called, supplementary benefit. It was like £60 a month. So I managed to find a job. It took me another job. It took me six weeks. So I know that these things happen. It is really difficult, and that is why I'm taking out rent guarantee insurance now, because I want to protect myself in case it goes wrong. And I think so. You're going to have the lawyers who are winning because they're going to have more work, and you've got the rent guarantee insurance companies that are going to be winning because And so the ones that are going to
maybe not.
and if you're a good tenant, you've got a good credit history and a good landlord reference, it will probably be fine for you. But if you're starting out, if you're if you've had some kind of problem in the past that will come up in credit referencing, it will be harder to find properties. And there's not social housing, and also the population's going up. So but then I'm happy staying as a landlord, because I think if we just kind of get rid of all the noise and just focus on being me, is what I'm trying to do, is to focus on being a great landlord and focus on looking after the people who live in my properties, or looking after the properties, and when something goes wrong, to fix it. And I was there yesterday with a sealant gum going like that round the window because something had come away. And I've tiled the kitchen. I do a lot of the DIY myself, and they're lovely people. It just doesn't have to be this battle that you see in the media. It's
I think it comes down to the mindset, doesn't it? People either have the mindset of this is a mutually beneficial arrangement, or they have the dog eat dog, kill or be killed mentality, which is, if I'm not winning, that means I'm losing, and therefore I must get one over you. And the minute either a landlord or a tenant has that attitude, it just always ends badly. You're getting a lot of love in the comments here.
Am I? Normally landlords get hate. So that's
says,
nice.
I want to go with my landlord. Someone called Andy says Suzanne's content she produces is bang on in terms I understand. She's a breath of fresh air. Big
thank you.
And Alexandra says, to great guest speaker. Yes, I know that's why Suzanne has an open invitation to come back whenever she'd like to on this channel. But just to finish the point I was making, I think that now the risks have stacked up so high, and the returns have come down because of the tax changes, that kind of stuff, that unless you are looking at a portfolio of 4 or more properties, I think the exposure is too great to things that might not even be the tenant's fault, and 2.5 million landlords, you say?
2.3, yeah.
2.3 million, and what's the average? Isn't it a 1 point something number of average? So
I was looking at the figures today. So I think it's something like 83% of landlords have up to 5 properties, and so under 5 properties, and 5 and above is 17%. But that's in terms of the numbers of landlords. In terms of tenancies, so individual tenancy agreements, I think it's, from memory, 51% are with the smaller landlords, up to and including 4, and 49% are with the bigger ones, the big portfolio landlords. So I have 4 properties, so I'm kind of at the edge. I don't think I actually don't want more than 4, because I can look after 4 myself. I think on that I can't remember, I then have to, it's just too much. Also, I can't afford another one.
Ian Campbell makes the comment. So I had a problem with a tenant a couple of years ago. The tenant was advised to stay and then trashed the property. The whole experience cost me £60,000. That's finance, lost rent, and repairs and court costs. And so this is exactly. I thank you, Ian, for sharing that, because this is exactly what wannabe landlords need to understand can happen.
Yeah.
It can and it does happen. And so you've got to, if you're making a financial decision about this, you've got to factor these scenarios in, because if you can't absorb a scenario like this, you can't afford to be a landlord.
And it is not passive income. If anyone tells you it's passive income, that's a red flag, because passive income is you put your money in the Nationwide and you get 4% or whatever it is, and you don't have to worry about it. But a lot of landlords don't make 4% because they've got all these extra costs, you know, like the chimney I've got, and I've got another one that the renders needs redoing, and you know, there's always something. It is rare that I get through a whole year without each property having a big something to do, and you've got to stash money aside. You can't, you know, you've got to keep a big float. I would say £10,000 per property. You just have to, you know, because you don't know what's, you know, you got to replace the roof and it's gone, and then, you know, that costs more than 10,000. You replace the windows. You need to have a contingency. Now, you know, this is me saying it for houses in the south, but you need to have money put aside, and there's all the maintenance that comes up. And I do a lot of it myself. I don't use letting agents, and you know, so I but I think if you can be a successful small landlord, absolutely, but you have to take it seriously. You know, there are organizations you can join, like the NRLA. There's also the Landlord Guild, and you can get content from me as well. But I think if anyone is a landlord, they need to educate themselves in it. When I say educate, I don't mean it's one of these run to the back of the room and get your credit card out because there's a one-time offer to you know, get passive income by going on a course. I don't mean that sort of education. I mean, there's so much free content available, you know, particularly that I give. Everything is free. There's nothing behind a paywall. But also beware, there is a lot of rubbish on YouTube. And people keep sending me screenshots saying, is this true? Is it like someone said to me in my Facebook group? So I have a Facebook group for landlords, landlord only one, and someone said that the renters' rights bill says we can't have guarantors anymore. And it's like, you know, it was on some forum that and the problem is that people say rubbish, and then AI picks it up. And so because so many people use AI to write content, it gets repeated. Then all of a sudden, something that is like Chinese whispers, it might have started off as almost truthful. It would have been like, there's a problem with, I don't know. I didn't even know where that would have come from. And there's a lot of stuff. And so, you know, and even like when I do stuff on YouTube, I might make a mistake and the rules change. And so you've always got to take it all with a pinch of salt.
I noticed your disclaimers.
Suzanne, I tried to do a funny one. I tried to do a funny one because, you know, I'm not giving legal advice.
No, exactly. But so we're running out of time. I've got a hard stop at 9 o'clock. And so I would like to take the last couple of minutes to wrap up and remind everybody that for the reasons you just outlined, you know, if you want to look in, there is a lot of content, but there's a lot of bad content. And you have made all of your blog content freely available, not behind any paywall. That's right. And have I got your website address right on the screen there?
And if there are any landlords out, I do a free weekly newsletter. It goes to well over 7,000 subscribers, and that doesn't go anywhere else. I write it. I wake up like 5:30 on Friday morning, go tippy tappy, and it's full of typos, and that way you know it's not AI.
Yeah. and so that's your YouTube channel as well. Is that correct? It's the indie_landlord.
Oh no, it's no that it's indie_.
Oh, okay. Quickly change it. Yeah, sorry. Whoopsie. I can edit that right now. Okay.
Yeah. But if you put the independent landlord on there, it should come up. Although number one is probably me on a video with you rather than my YouTube channel.
Yes, it is. I know. And well, Suzanne, thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful. That hour has flown.
It has. It has.
And I'm sorry to all of you. There's some fantastic questions. I'm sorry to those of you who've asked questions. I had 7 more questions pinned that I was going to ask. We ran out of time. Will you come back another time,
Sure.
please? And we'll follow up the next time there's some news on this.
Yeah.
In the meantime, thank you so much for your time, especially at the end of what's been a very long day for you. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please go and check out Suzanne's website if you're a landlord and her YouTube channel. And thanks for coming. And we'll see you all next time, everybody. Bye-bye.